later on, in the middle 90s, you have written a Goofy movie. That was,
right. Uh-huh.
A worldwide success. That was also the directorial debut of Kevin Lima that went on to direct Tarzan.
Right. I cannot take 1 ounce of the credit away from Kevin. When he came on board, he had a crew that he loved working with, and he and his crew brought tons of great ideas. I had never written an animated feature before. So it was difficult for me because they took me off of the floor, 4th floor of the building, and stuck me on a different floor in a corner where there was nobody. I mean, the whole area was empty. It was just me sitting there typing. And I think I worked on the script. I worked on that movie for like 13 months. And pretty much a lot of it I was alone. So what would happen is I would write this stuff and I'd say, oh, this seems funny. I've done this for years. This should work. And because I had been story editing Goof Troop. And, when Kevin and Brian and all these guys came on board, they started to storyboard the things I did. And then somebody would say, what if we did this instead? And it's just a different mindset, because in TV animation, because the timetable is so fast, people just say, give me the script and I'll start drawing, But with a feature, you have this whole crew and they're working overseas in France, they're working overseas in Japan or whatnot. And they can sort of take their time and cherry these things out. So a lot of stuff that I wrote, I was sad. It's like, oh, gee, they didn't do this. Or they would storyboard it and then say, I think we should change this. And unfortunately, I have to reach in my pocket. We didn't have these things, And so I never went up and took pictures of all the storyboards, which I wish now I had, because a lot of that stuff probably was just thrown away. So I can remember looking at a whole sequence of a bungee cord jump off a bridge, and it was very clever, and then it just disappeared. So it was like a big lesson for me, because when I started in records, I basically did everything. I wrote and produced and cast and directed and did everything. And then when you get to writing a feature, it's like, okay, here's what I think, everybody does something else. So it's a bit humbling, but I also remember sitting down with Kevin at lunch and saying, God, I got to tell you, I feel like I'm worthless on this project, and he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I wrote all this stuff and, what am I supposed to do now with it? And he said, Jim, we wouldn't be here if we weren't standing on your shoulders, I said, oh, okay. And I think it's just the nature of the beast that, writing for a live action sitcom, writing for a live action movie, writing for animated movie, all these things, there are different skill sets, there are different mindsets for it. And, when you slide into a new genre, you have to, reprogram your brain for that. So,
yeah.
But a Goofy movie was a huge, it is by now, it's a huge success. And it wasn't when it first came out. And now it's become this cult thing, People go crazy for it. When I was at D23, I think it was in 2015, I think it was the 25th anniversary, I don't know, something like that. And they put a bunch of us on stage, huge screen. Here's Don Hahn as the host, me as the writer, and then all the actors, We're sitting there and they're showing all this stuff over our heads. And it was just like, wow, this is cool. Well, they stuck us in the biggest room they could find, and it held, I think, 900 people. which is a huge number of people if you've ever been to a fan convention, and they turned people away. People were lined up trying to get into this thing, and not everybody could.
Speaking of familiar characters, because Goofy is one of those household names,
yes.
I want to speak a little bit about Scrooge, but not
Scrooge
McDuck. But not McDuck. Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Oh, Okay, sure. Let's talk about Ebenezer Scrooge.
I absolutely love A Christmas Carol and try to see its millions of adaptations. In 1997, you worked on one more version of the Dickens classic. As a storyteller.
I did two.
Two?
Yeah. I did All Dogs Christmas Carol, and then I did A Christmas Carol for the company DIC, D-I-C.
That's the one I know. The one
right. And plus I played Jacob Marley in a local production of A Christmas Carol.
So that gives me more data to the question, because my question is, as a writer, as a storyteller, why do you think we remain so attached to that particular story? Why is it so powerful?
God, I wish I knew, because you often hear the term in Hollywood, catching lightning in a bottle, like, why is Dora the Explorer popular? I don't know. I'm not a kid, I don't share her lifestyle or anything like that, but it's a hugely popular show. So, it's obviously resonating with someone at a certain level. I think part of it is just the nostalgia of it. It's like every Christmas, Christmas Carol's going to be out, right? It's a story that just makes a lot of sense. You've got this grumpy old guy like me, grumpy old guy who is just horrible to everyone. And then these ghosts come and they scare him, and he wants to now change his worldview. And I think there's a part of us as human beings where we all want that as part of our human experience, that something miraculous will come and change who we are and make us better. So what did Charles Dickens do? I don't know. He caught lightning in a bottle, I mean, he was a successful writer, but, nobody falls over themselves, over Bleak House, But Christmas Carol, yeah, yay, kind of thing. I feel really privileged that in writing for animation, I have co-written with some great people like William Shakespeare and Jules Verne and Charles Dickens, and so it's fun to try and take something that everybody knows and not put a new spin on it, but at least, try and make it as relevant as you can for your target audience. And Ebenezer Scrooge, we could talk about him for weeks, but, basically, people have complained, well, it's not really a story of redemption. They just scared the hell out of him. And he said, I better change, okay, fine, but still, everybody says that's a cool story. There's a character in Russia, a cartoon series that's very popular called Masha and the Bear.
Yeah,
and it's this little girl. You've seen it.
It's extremely popular in Portugal also.
Oh, good. So there's this big bear and this little girl, and she's always getting into trouble, and the bear is always helping her get out of trouble. And I just find it a really amusing, entertaining show. And then I read these reviews about it, and people are saying, well, she's a brat, and this bear takes care of her, and it's not right. We should get it. Fine, be upset. You know what? I don't know. Everybody's got an opinion, so.
It's a big trend to be upset nowadays. It's a big trend when we talk about entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. And even Disney now has a streaming service called Disney Plus. I don't know whether you have it in Portugal, but everything that they own, Star Wars and Muppets and all that stuff, is on Disney Plus. And every movie that Disney made was going to be on Disney Plus, and now they're pulling movies. Oh, well, we can't show Peter Pan because it's got Native Americans in it. And what? Come on, just put a blurb at the front. This is a product of its time. Just enjoy it.
We spoke mainly about your work at Disney, but you have been involved in so many other projects, some of them with iconic characters. Which ones marked you the most? Which are the ones that you look with more?
That's a good question. I have found that I've written on several shows that we call herd shows, H-E-R-D. The way that deer are all in a herd and cows are all in a herd. It's just like it's a bunch of characters all bunched together. And it's like, well, who's this guy? Oh, well, he's the chubby one. And who's this one? Oh, that's the scientific one. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that information? So those are not fun. But when you get a character that you understand, you can write for that person because it's probably someone someone like that. And David Weimers, who I mentioned before, created Launchpad McQuack, and he told me, I love Launchpad, by the way. Launchpad, he says, I'd drive to work and I would have discussions with Launchpad, who was supposedly sitting next to me in the car, just because he felt like he knew who that person was and how they would react. And so, when I work on a show, I like to think, this guy would be fun to have a beer with. This would be a great guy to hang out at a party with.
As someone who's writing fuels children's imagination, what are your main concerns when you face the blank page?
That's a really good question. And just bear with me for a second, because I teach animation writing. My mother-in-law says I couldn't write a story to save my life. I would be so tense being caught up in something like that. And other people say, oh, well, what happens when you get writer's block and all? I don't get writer's block, and I don't get hung up. I feel like if I can figure out what the story is in my head, where it's going to go and where all the obstacles are, then it's just a matter of sitting down and having your character go through all these passages, in the story, and those obstacles get bigger and bigger and bigger till you hit the climax. And so when I look at a blank page, I don't look at a blank page. It's in my head. So all I'm doing is trying to get it out of my head and onto the screen or onto the paper. And I tell my class this, it's like, you have the most brilliant idea on the planet to save the rainforest or whatever. How are you going to convince somebody that your idea is brilliant and that you deserve money to do what you're doing? They all say, I don't know. It's like, well, nobody can read your mind. You have to figure out a way to take your ideas and put them into a format that other people can look at and read and put in their minds and go, I get it, So in that aspect, I never feel like I'm dry. I've run out of ideas. There's always ideas. I have I have a plot storyline that I have used in maybe 4 or 5 different series. It's okay. I'm off to Hollywood to find myself and become a star. And when they get there, they realize that, it's not that easy. So they write back all these letters like, oh, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And they fool their friends until the friends say, wow, this person's really successful. Let's all go visit them. And then when they get there, it's like, now this person has to pretend like they're famous and know everybody. I mean, it's not that clever. It's just a storyline. And I've sold it time and again. And not because it's like, well, all I do is take out this person's name and put this person's name in. It isn't that at all. It's just everybody's going to tell that story differently because, if it's Lucille Ball in the lead role, she's going to do certain things. And if it's Fred Flintstone in that role, he's going to do different things. That's all. So your question is really good. I just think you keep your ears open and you listen for stuff.
How did you start teaching, and
right?
What are the things that you like the most and the challenges?
Actually, I think it depends a lot on who you are and what you did growing up. I was fascinated by the film industry, but I lived in Detroit, Michigan. They make cars there. They don't make movies. And so I would borrow my dad's 8mm film, camera and shoot these silly comedies. And they were silent. There was no sound in them. And you start to teach yourself, oh, I better make sure that I have a close-up so you know who we're looking at. And, you sort of figure this stuff out. There were no classes in filmmaking in high school and stuff back then. So you sort of teach yourself. And then when I got to college, I started writing and producing these old radio show comedies for the local radio station. And again, nobody said, oh, you got too many characters. You have not enough characters. It was just something I did. So by the time that I got to Disney and interviewed to be a record producer, I had already produced several radio shows, which are just like doing story records. And I got the job. When Eisner took over and said, we're going to do animation, I was this genius who had done Mickey Mouse Disco, So I got invited to this bash, and fine, Jim, go do that. So it wasn't like I was some bum off the street that just wandered in and they said, here, do this. I had a modicum of experience with a lot of different things. I had been an actor and, the whole 9 yards of that stuff. My parents were choreographers in Detroit and whatnot. Anyway, so the long and short of it is that by the time I was doing Gummi Bears, we were sort of fumbling our way smartly through 2 seasons of that series. And I couldn't understand, NBC kept saying, well, your stories aren't very good and you're not doing this. And what? I don't get it. And Art Vitello, the producer, said, you may want to read this book. It's called Screenplay by Sid Field, right? Okay. Well, Sid Field is telling people how to write a feature film. Well, I'm not writing feature films. I'm writing 11-minute, episodes, but all the same things are there. You've got to capture the audience in the first minute or two. You've got to make sure that you set this up and pay this off and have lots of funny obstacles and then a gag ending. And it was sort of changed my mind. Not that I didn't know this stuff, but it was all sort of jumbled in my psyche. And this kind of brought it all into focus. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I get this now, So I worked on several shows. This is a long way to answer your question. I'd worked on several shows, and someone at UCLA Extension Program got my name and said, we want you to teach a class in animation writing. I said, okay, right? And So I had to like create this 10-week class, 30-hour class from the ground up. Here's what animation is. Here's what, comedy is. Here's what your audience is. And, I've been sort of honing that class over the decades. And because they had invited me to do this and it was successful, I taught many classes at UCLA and then eventually branched off and started teaching in Australia, just like what you and I are doing over the internet. And then I actually went to places to teach, Barcelona, Spain, and, London and things like that. How did I get into it? Again, I can't say who at UCLA got my name or why they called me or why any of this stuff happened, but it happened, and I was very excited about the opportunity to teach, because every time that I taught something, I realized I was teaching myself that thing better,
Jim, just to talk a little bit about present and future projects that you're working on right now. You can tell us a little bit about.
I'm happy to. In '93, I left Disney after 17 years and I became freelance, and I've been freelance ever since. And I was terrified that I had made a huge mistake by leaving Disney and I would never work again and it was going to be horrible. And then, even though there were some dry spots in there, for the most part, it's like, oh, I got this. I'm the story editor on this show. Oh, I'm the story editor on this show, And I have worked pretty consistently since '93 on lots and lots of different shows from lots and lots of different countries. Sometimes it was a little tense being in that situation, but now I am technically retired. I reached my retirement age. I get Social Security, I get my Disney pension, blah, 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 blah. So in one sense, it's like I don't have to think about earning that money because I basically earned it already. I earned it by working for 17 years at Disney and, paying into Social Security and blah, blah, blah. So everything that I do now is icing on the cake. And what do I work on? Well, most of the things I work on, if I said to you, oh, I'm doing, I just story edited 104 episodes of Invention Story for China, you'd say, never heard of it, right?
Right.
Well, that's just it, is that, when I work for these foreign countries, a lot of these shows never make it to the United States. So it's not like I feel I got to get my name out there. I got to get my name stamped on these things because I'm important. I've done my important stuff. It's not like I'm struggling to compete with someone. So in essence, someone asked me, well, when are you going to stop writing? I said, when they pry the keyboard from my cold, dead hands is when I'll stop, because it's just, this is what I do and it's fun. And
the writer is almost always the most invisible agent.
Yeah.
How is your relationship with the fans of the shows that you helped create?
It's so odd that you say that, because everybody that I've worked with, especially at Disney, in my mind, they're still there and they're still doing what they do. And they're still the same age they were back then, And I see some of these people now and it's like, who's that old guy? Oh God, that's Tom. Oh, geez, So, everything changes. And, but I've been very fortunate because I've been kind of on the cutting edge of a lot of popular things, records, TV shows, movies, and whatnot. And so, when I go to these conventions, I know the audience wants to hear Bill Farmer speak as Goofy. And I know they want to hear Jim Cummings speak as Pete or Winnie the Pooh. You know, they know who these voices are. They know who these actors are. They've, done their homework. Not everybody says, did you write that episode? They don't know. They don't care, So yes, the writer is kind of invisible, but because I've been the story editor and showrunner on a lot of things, I get invited to speak about them. And it's nice because the people that do know what I do are kind of diehard fans. It's like, oh, that's Jym Magon. So sorry, I'm just rambling. I was at a convention and my son was there. He's 18 now, but he was like, I don't know, 12 or something. And I saw him sitting in the front row, and I made some references to him and during the panel discussion. And after the panel was over, people came up and they wanted autographs and things. And my son wandered off into the lobby waiting for me. And a fanboy, big guy, came up to him and said, "Your dad is Jym Magon." And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Your father is a great man." My son said, "Yeah." Because, my kids don't think of me that way. They just know there's this ogre in the other room who keeps telling me to be quiet because he's working, kind of thing. And that's the dichotomy of our lives, is that, I go places that nobody knows who I am. But when they do, all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, you worked on a Goofy movie," then they get all get excited, So yes, it's good to have a fan base. It's good that some people recognize me.
Going back again to Ducktales, if you had to single out some names that together with you made the series possible, people that probably I haven't heard about and some fans haven't heard about, but that had a contribution, an important contribution to that project.
Mark Zazlov. Mark and I were partners for many years. We created Talespin together. He was the story editor on Winnie the Pooh. Carl Gears was the producer on Winnie the Pooh. Really a smart, talented guy. Tom Enriquez, brilliant storyboard artist. He would draw so well on the storyboard that they would actually take the panels and blow them up and paint over them. He was designing the backgrounds without knowing it, David Weimers and Ken Kuntz, a really great writing team. Tad Stones came over from features, and he can draw like a sumbitch and story edit and write as well. So, we were very fortunate that we had a lot of dedicated, smart people working there, and I was fortunate because I hired 6 or 8 writers, to join the crew. So there is an advantage to being in the house, being part of the project, because yes, I sit at my desk here at home and I type, and sometimes I call up some people and chat with them. But when you're in the work environment with other people who are tremendously creative, you end up walking down the hall and chatting with someone, or you say, "I just had this idea. Does this sound interesting?" You're feeding off of each other, and it's that kind of, energy that makes the projects exciting. I know there were people working there that was just like, "Oh, I storyboard and I do this." but almost everybody that I really liked, really admired, really liked working with were very talented people. Ed Wexler was a great designer. Just, it was a lot of fun.